Prosperity is more than a number. It's the power to shape what's possible for you, your family, and your heirs. Here, you'll find ideas for building wealth, safeguarding it, and translating it into true prosperity with insight from actual business owners and financial professionals. Welcome to the FDP Prosperity Report, hosted by your Chief Prosperity Officer, Mark Chandik.
Hi, I'm Mark Chandik, and welcome to the Prosperity Report. I'm excited today to introduce you to my guest, Dan Ugalde. He's a longtime board member of the Southern California Contractors Association. He grew a highly successful trucking company that supplied earth-moving trucks to construction sites throughout Southern California. A master at forming long-term relationships, Dan is also very active in helping the industry fight harmful legislation, having also served on the SCCA Legislative Committee. After a long and productive career, Dan took an interesting approach when exiting his company. He chose to liquidate rather than sell. Through that process, he made sure his key employees were all taken care of, helping many of them retire or find places within the industry. Dan married his college sweetheart while attending UC Santa Barbara. They've been married for 48 years and have 2 children, both of whom work in the construction industry. Dan and Janet also have 6 grandchildren. Dan has been a friend and client for over 2 decades and has the distinction of something that I strive for, a very low golf handicap. Dan, welcome to the Prosperity Report.
Hey, good morning, Mark.
Glad you're here. Appreciate your time. And we're going to have some fun today. I have some questions that I think our audience is really going to enjoy hearing your wisdom and your experience. And the first is, why don't we start at the start? Tell me about how you entered the industry, when you started, just kind of your beginnings, if you will.
Well, I got married in 1974 to my wife. You know, I didn't know much about her family early on, but her dad was a large engineering contractor, and he started in the trucking business. About the time we got married, he was already attempting to jettison that company and just go full-fledged into general engineering. And he approached 3 or 4 people, but nobody really wanted to buy from him because he wanted to make sure that they basically catered to him, and he was a hard guy to work for. So then he came to us after getting turned down, and I said no. I was in graduate school. My wife goes, "Oh no, it's a real good opportunity for us. We need to do this." Her idea was that we do it for a couple years and get on our feet, but then we ended up doing it for 4 years. But November 1st, 1974, we started Ugalde Trucking. We bought a truck, which came with a PUC permit, which you needed to have, and we opened up our business, small little 600 square foot office with about 3 employees, I think. That's all we had then. And that's how we started in business.
You know, you're what I describe as a maverick, you know, an entrepreneur at your core. What are some of the changes that you've witnessed during your multiple decades from a business and regulatory perspective?
Well, there was a lot of changes. When we started in business, we were regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, and we had what they called a minimum rate tariff system. In 1996, when the U.S. was deregulating airlines, and we went through deregulation in the trucking business. So that was actually a boon for us. There's a lot of people that left the business. They were scared about what was going to happen with rates. And we were free to charge whatever we wanted to, whether it be lower or higher, without having to go through this whole regulatory process of getting it approved. So for me, it was like, if I saw a job and I say, "Hey guys, we're going to work for $2 an hour less," whatever it was, but I go, "We're going to work like 10-hour days or 6 days a week." And if I could see that use factor, I'd had to sell that, but you could do it. Before when we were under regulation, you couldn't do that. So that was one thing. But the other things were, as we got into 2000s and CARB started introducing, you know, our new air rules, got really cumbersome on people that owned trucks. Everybody had to update their trucks. That was huge. And one of the reasons why I ended up eventually leaving, but more on that later. Also, what really happened was regulation of the earth movement, just in general. Like, it used to be, I could get a call at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, some guy says, hey, I need 10 loads of dirt. Can you ship me some tomorrow, Dan? And, yeah, sure. You know, cut a deal like that. Now you don't move dirt without testing it first. Everything's got to get tested before it can go to a new site to make sure we don't have any kind of toxicity in it. So that was huge. And I think, though, as far as earth movement, moving dirt trucks, those are some of the biggest things.
I think you touched on regulation relative to air quality and bringing trucks and all heavy equipment into compliance with California compliance. That was very expensive for contractors. Many of them didn't make it or ended up leaving the business because they just simply couldn't afford to improve their trucks, right? Their equipment.
Yeah, what happened in our little small, you know, dump truck's a small industry. Most of the guys are just like single truck owner operators. We have some fleets, but there's a lot of single truck owner operators that just didn't know how to get any of the grant money that was available to them to upgrade their trucks. And also, because they were so small, CARB really didn't want to give them money. They wanted to get large fleets that were putting like 100,000 plus miles a year, because it was all computed how much you know, carbon they're taking out of the air. And for our little guys that maybe travel, you know, 40,000 miles in a year wasn't enough. So they didn't get any of that money. So it was really hard. The guys had to go find their own source of funding to get their trucks.
As you look back on your 4-decade plus career, as an entrepreneur and as a contractor, what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see others making that maybe you avoided? What are some of the big ones?
I know for one of the things is just to continue to do what you know how to do. Two of the largest trucking companies in Southern California, which were my competitors, and we were all about the same age, both of them kind of decided to take that leap into large contracting, and they both ended up within a couple of years filing BK. I mean, they just went bankrupt. So I think to continue to do what you know best is good advice. I also see a lot of contractors that they want a job so bad that they bid it too low. I mean, you know, you got to bid a job for what what you think it's worth, not to beat the competition. And then, of course, a lot of mistakes that are made with contractors is they don't have enough cash. It's really hard in the construction business when, you know, you're paying your bills every 30 days, but you're not getting your receivables in for 60, 90 days, and sometimes it could be more. So that's kind of the biggest pitfalls that I see.
You know, I think all those pitfalls that you outlined really boil down to managing growth, understanding how to manage growth. And you know, I have lots of experience working with contractors, and from personal experience, you know, I'll talk to a contractor and they'll be grossing 20, 25 million a year, and they put 3 million on the bottom line. They're very selective on what they bid and the jobs that they work. And then they get, for whatever reason, decided they want to get bigger and they want to get up to 100 million, and it crushes them. As you said, they bid a job too low, with not enough profit in it, and it basically puts them under.
Sure.
So really managing that growth is very, very difficult, and it needs to be handled appropriately.
Yeah, correct.
We talked, I mentioned in the introduction how you exited your company. You ended up deciding on liquidation, and I thought it was terrific the way you helped your longtime employees. Either they transitioned to retirement or you found them other employment with companies, friends of yours. What drove you to the decision to liquidate versus, let's say, try to find a buyer or sell to insiders in your company?
I think mainly I had, 2 children, and they both worked in my company. My son was there running our shop for about 5 years, and my daughter had been on board for about 10 years. She was running my office. But when I saw all the new regulations coming, and after a lot of the guys bought newer trucks and complied, then as we knew what was going to happen, they raised the bar again, the Air Resources Board, and they said, okay, now you're going to have to buy even newer trucks. And you could see that they were never going to be satisfied until they got rid of diesel trucks, period. And you know, I'm just kind of going, God, I didn't have trucks. I relied on owner-operators. I had a bunch of trailers so I had a leasing company, but I needed those owner-operators, and they were the ones that we were losing. I didn't see a way for my children, and I really didn't want them to try to navigate that, because, and the real reason why, and this is why I left, was that the state of California was so punitive in what they were going to do to violators. Like originally when the rules came out, they were talking about for every truck that you dispatch that you know is not compliant. And by the way, they're making me responsible for whether they're compliant or not, even though I don't look under their engines to see what kind of motor they have. But $10,000 a day.
Wow.
So a guy that works for me day in and day out, and let's say he doesn't have a compliant truck, I'm responsible for that if I ever got caught. Well, my wife and I were very successful. We had a lot of money that we had, amassed, and we're like, why would we risk that? I mean, that was really our thinking, and we didn't want to do that, and we didn't really want to we didn't want to see our kids have to go through that or have to finance them to try to get through that too. I didn't really see a path forward for them, so I decided
How
it
long
was
did
best
the
just to
process
leave.
take for liquidation? Once you decided, okay, this is how I'm going to exit, to complete the jobs, wind down payables, receivables. How long did that take you?
I mean, we closed our business doors in the end of 2013, but we didn't. It took us about 5 or 6 months beyond that to collect most of our money and just close up all the loose ends. Yeah, it took a while.
Did you feel satisfied at the end of it?
My God, I was so relieved. Yeah. And, it's interesting how many people that I still am connected to industry. And so I run into my old friends that are still, involved in the trucking business. And they just go, well, you left at the right time, because it's turned out to be really tough, just like we knew it would be.
There's a certain elegance in leaving when you're on the top.
Yeah, yeah.
Knowing when to exit, and that takes a lot of discipline. Your world revolved around the competitive bidding process. But one thing that I've witnessed over the decades that we've known each other is your ability to forge long-term relationships. And even though, again, the bidding process is competitive, have those long-term relationships helped you and helped your company? And is that something you would recommend to other contractors, to really foster those relationships, even though there's a bidding process that goes on?
Well, for me and what I did, so most of the time I'm working as a subcontractor. I'm working for engineering and grading contractors. So to me, I'm providing a service. And so service is important. We have to be good and efficient at that. If a contractor says, hey, Dan, I need 50 trucks tomorrow, I need to get him 50 trucks, As my father-in-law used to tell me, when we'd be short on trucks, and he'd call me up, how many you got? And he'd want 50, and I go, I got 49. He goes, that ain't enough, I want 50. I mean, he was tough, but, relationships are everything. Because I thought about this question. First I was going to say, 50% of my work was through who I knew, but it was really more like 70. And that became more evident the older I got, because I was in the business for so long, I fostered a lot of friendships, and didn't always get all their work, but usually if I was competitive, they'd say, I want to use you, Dan, but you need to, it was a negotiable thing. Not so much in the public works side, but in private works. So yeah, I think, getting out of that office and taking your customers to lunch, to ball games, to go out on golf outings, and I did all that, and I enjoyed that, and it was very important, I think, to foster those relationships.
I think, some people might think that the contracting industry in Southern California is just gigantic, and I guess from a volume perspective it is, but there's only so many players.
Yeah.
And so, not burning bridges in the way you do business is very, very important.
Yes.
Now, you've said several times you have a long 40-year career. You've seen a lot of boom and busts in California, a lot of recessions and a lot of amazing economic expansion periods. What advice would you have for contractors in navigating the highs and the lows of the natural highs and lows of the industry?
For me and for what I did, it's a little bit different than your average contractor because I was on the transportation side, trucking. We have a lot of owner-operators. And so if I was typically running 70 or 80 trucks a day, and all of a sudden I had a couple of really large jobs and I knew I was going to have to ramp up and run 100 to 125, which was not uncommon. We would just get on the phones and just start calling people and, advertising what we had, like, hey, I have a job starting up in your area because it's a huge geographical area and I'm going to be working there 2 months. And really just sell it and try to, and so you just have to expand. But that's what we need to do. We need to increase our fleet size by going out and getting guys that don't normally work for us. Contractors, it's a little different because, if you're a contractor and you're, let's say, moving dirt with scrapers, and all of a sudden you need 10 extra scrapers, there's rental companies maybe you can get them from, but if they're not there, then you got to go buy some of your own iron. Plus, most contractors want to control a certain amount of their work with their own equipment. So that's expensive. I always have a friend of mine, he was an insurance guy, and he always just say, yeah, construction, he says, this dirt moving business is unlike any other, Dan. He goes, the only place where you see somebody gets a $2 million job and goes out and buys $4 million worth of equipment, And that always stuck with me. I go, yeah, of course, that's that debt thing we were talking about, and you get in trouble. That's great when you have that big job going, then all of a sudden that job ends. It's like, now what do I do with this iron? And I'll make payments on.
You have those payments for
you got to go find another job, and that's when you start taking that cheap work because you got to feed this animal you created, And
that's the downward spiral that they can find themselves in. I thought you were going to focus in on that. Is this really cash flow management for contractors where getting ready and assuming that, making the assumption that it's not always great and it's not always bad. And so you're always in transition one to the other, and to really watch your cash flow and manage it so that when the lean times come, you can make it through the winter.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, I in my early life, in my early work life, Janet and I, we were just struggling. And we had lots of problems with having enough cash. The problem with our business was, I told you we were regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. They had payment rules. You had to pay your guys on the 20th of every month for the previous month's work. So, we did have a line of credit, but I was hard on my contractors about, hey, I got to get paid. They didn't really care, most of them. It's like, we'll pay you when we get paid, Dan. That was tough. As we grew and we got more successful, we used to keep piles of cash around so we could pay our trucks. One of the things why we got truckers to work for us and why they liked to work for us was we were one of the few companies where they always knew they were going to get paid on time. That was kind of unusual. And we did that by having a lot of cash around.
Gotcha.
So, if I'm doing $1 million a month, which I was, I had to keep a couple $1 million around all the time. Yeah.
Now, we talked about your truckers that were contract truckers, so they would ebb and flow with the work that you had on the books. But you had an office staff and people that were with you all the time. And I was struck with the quality of people that you had and how long they worked for you. They really enjoyed working for you. Can you share with us a little bit about your hiring process, what you look for, what you think the secret of success is as far as finding great employees in the construction industry, in your industry, and keeping them for the long term?
Well, my wife ran the office. I ran everything else, kind of the field and estimated jobs and the shop. Her and I were like different. If she had an opening in the office, she wanted to, well, that's back in the days when you would actually run an ad in the paper, but she would run ads and then go through the whole process of interviewing and hire. And she always she goes, oh, I don't want somebody that's already set in their ways. I want to train them to do the work how I want them to. That was her thought process. I didn't have the time to spend to train people. I mean, I wanted them to come on board kind of knowing what they're supposed to do. So I always looked for people that had some experience. And I mean, I hired several dispatchers over the years that I got that worked at other companies that I knew they weren't happy, and I just said, hey, I got a spot here, why don't you come over here? And like one gal that had dispatched for about 3 or 4 years that came to work for me, she ended up staying with me for 20 years. Yeah. I had a guy in my shop that worked for me for 35 years. Pete, who who was running my field, he worked for me for 30 years. I didn't really like changing people. If they were competent, I would keep them. And even if they weren't always real competent, if they could do their job with a little bit of, little nudging in the rear, I didn't just let them go or fire them because I knew who they were. I knew what I had. So, yeah, I didn't go through. I think most of the employees like working for us. We didn't go through a lot of employees, and we never got larger than about 15 employees. That was it.
One of the things that that I know that you did is you paid them a competitive wage, obviously, but you also had profit sharing, and so you shared the success of the company over the long term. And when you liquidated, those assets got transferred to IRAs to those employees, and I think they did quite well. And you were you helped in that regard. You helped them be successful in their retirement.
I know, and some of my competitors in trucking business, when I told them that I was doing things like having profit sharing, and early on we used to provide health insurance, and we paid 100% of it until my insurance guy told me I was nuts, that you can't do that anymore, Dan. But I mean, we did that for a long time, and nobody else was really doing that in the trucking side. Probably in contracting, I'm sure they were, but we've always felt we need to take care of our people. That was important.
Well, it sounds like the treatment of those people was reciprocated.
Yes.
Helped add to your success. Talked a little bit about family, about how both your children worked for you and then are in the construction industry now, but I wanted to talk a little bit bigger. You have a big family here in Southern California. How important is it to have support from family when you're in the construction world? I mean, we talked off camera about getting calls at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. You hope that those are minimal, but you do. But how does family support help you in the construction industry in your particular, owning a trucking company, for example?
I can start with my wife and business partner. I mean, Janet and I we always were business partners for 40 years. Even after 30, when she decided to leave, she was never totally gone. I mean, I would come home and I'd have questions. She was like who I bounced ideas off of. And my daughter actually filled her seat. She came in and she was running the office for about 10 years after my wife decided to retire. My son, like I said, he came in. He's an operating engineer, but there was a slow period of time where he was getting bounced around a little bit, and I needed some help. I had a couple guys actually that passed away that were working for me in the shop, and I needed some help. And I said, why don't you come run the shop, which he had been working in since he was about 12 or 13 years old. And he said, yeah. So he came over and did that. I have, my brother-in-law is an engineer, my sister-in-law is an engineer. I always had, and we have an attorney in the family too. So there was always people that I had in my family that I could go to and ask questions. Not to mention my father-in-law, who was a very successful engineer, and my mother-in-law, who ran their company on the money side. She was so yeah. We had a lot of resources. That was really important. And,
I'm going to shift gears a little bit now.
sure.
You've always given back to the less fortunate with different charities, and oftentimes taking the lead role. I remember starting a charitable tournament together, you and I, and it was a lot of work, and you took the lead role for that. And how has your work with a charity and the less fortunate made an impact on you, your business, and the community? How important do you think it is for entrepreneurs and contractors specifically to give back and be involved in charitable endeavors?
Well, I think it's really important. I know for me, I didn't grow up in a family that had much, so my parents were not worried about helping other people. They were worried about, helping us and just surviving day to day. Like, once I had become successful, and all my in-laws took the lead in that. My mother-in-law, and she was involved in lots of different charities. Orangewood was one. And then my wife ended up going to work for CAS, as you know, Child Abuse Service Team. For 18 years, she did that as a volunteer. So I would have to say, in terms of my wife and I getting involved, she set the tone for that, and we started that golf tournament. We did that for 8 years. I had already done some things in my church, so that kind of got me going on that. And then I met friends, mutual friends of ours, that basically said, "How much did you give? Because if it didn't hurt, that wasn't enough." So yeah, I had other people in my life that were also my friends that were giving of themselves, of time and money, and I thought, I need to do this, and that's what got me started on it, and it feels pretty good.
Well, what impressed me about it especially is that even earlier in your career, when the grind is happening and cash flow isn't as good, you're still giving back. You don't wait until you're an old man and you're wealthy and now I'll get involved. You were involved in the entire way.
Yeah, and I think when you're working like that every day, the people in your life, which are your workers, you're giving back by helping them and their families. So that's part of it. And then I think you tend to expand that eventually, which is at least what happened with me. And my wife and I are involved in quite a number of charities these days. So
it's admirable for sure. Do you rely on the advice of professionals? This is a little bit of a softball, maybe self-serving a bit, but over the years, did you enjoy working with professionals and seek the advice or counsel of professionals? And if so, how was that helpful? Why was that important?
It's very important. And I'm just gonna use one example here, but out of left field, I think it was around 2005 or 6, a company came to me and they wanted to buy me out. And of course my wife's going, sell. And I don't think I was really ready to, but then I got thinking, well, my gosh, if they want to pay me enough money, maybe I will. And so I didn't know anything about selling the company, so I had to put together a team. And as you know, you were on that team. Mm-hmm. So I had my financial guy, I had a CPA, an attorney, and just getting advice from my team about what to do. And as it turned out, I think they were just fishing and they wanted to look at my books, and because when I gave them the number that I wanted, they just no, we're not interested. So
yeah.
But I know. I mean, I got into doing contracting work, but not contract. Only what I should say is I was doing large trucking jobs, which I had to sign contracts, and I had to bond some of that work. So I needed some expertise in there. So yeah, I had to have an insurance guy and a bonding guy that knew those ropes, because I didn't know much about it. I started estimating large jobs, which, even though, I know how to figure costs for my trucking business, I needed the experience, and I knew quite a number of estimators that, tutored me a little bit to help me how to put the bid together, correctly and not make mistakes. So yeah, I always sought help of people that knew things that I didn't know, so I didn't make a big mistake.
Avoiding big mistakes.
Yeah.
That's important. Those are the questions that I had prepared, but I want to finish by asking if you have any thoughts, from this amazing career of yours, of anything that I haven't covered that you'd like to share with the audience about your experience, or a takeaway, or something that you might think would
Oh my
be
God!
helpful.
Now you're going to make me think. Well, I pinch myself. I always say I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world, just because. I was in college. I got a degree in psychology. I never figured I was going to be like in the trucking and construction world. It just wasn't on my radar at all. So the fact that I ended up getting involved in that, and I totally embraced getting involved in associations, not only with SCCA but my trucking association. I'm still involved in both, even though I'm retired. And I think I met a lot of really neat people there, and some of them are some of my best friends today through my meetings, through my introduction and association. So yeah, my life, my whole life really revolved around my work, and most of my friendships have come out of there. And that's how you and I kind of met, through a third party, a person who was in the construction business. So. Funny how that all works out, huh?
And here we are. You're enjoying the second half of your life.
Yes, definitely.
Doing some traveling and playing golf, which you have a natural talent for.
Right.
I appreciate your time today. Hopefully I'm sure the audience has taken away some great little nuggets. And I thank you for your time.
Okay.
And expertise. That's all the time we have for today in this edition of the Prosperity Report. Look forward to seeing you next time. You've invested years into building your business. Have you thought about what will eventually happen if you chose to ease up, retire completely, or sell or transfer it to someone else? You want to make sure you get maximum value for all you've created. That's why I want to offer you our free online exit preparedness assessment. Our 18-point evaluation helps you assess your readiness, including owner objectives, ownership transfers, business continuity, and maximizing business value. It only takes 5 minutes, and we'll email you a report that evaluates your answers and offers you ideas about how you can move forward. There's no cost and no obligation. Just go to fdpwm.com and look for our Exit Strategies page. When done right, a sale or transfer can take years of preparation. So get your assessment today.